for your continued watch care over us, for your loving kindness, and your tender mercies. Father, as we come together to honour you and worship you, we pray that you would guide our thoughts this morning and that you would bless us. We ask all these things in the precious holy name of Jesus. Amen. Good morning, everybody. For those who are watching online, we've had a number of studies that have been out of class time. So I wanted to just catch up with some of those things. But also there's many threads that are all being discussed at once. So I just want to have a short recap of some of the things that we've looked at and some of the questions that have come from people who've been watching online. So if we turn to Daniel chapter 8, as we're turning there, just want to make one correction. I've already made this, but maybe people didn't pick up on it. In one of the earlier, maybe the first presentation, we said that there was a relationship of these 70 years of captivity between this period of captivity and the preceding years of the kings, from King Saul. And we can identify this as being 490. I think in the first presentation I said that this was Zedekiah, where the 70 years begins, which would be the end of the 490. But of course it's not Zedekiah, it's Jehoiakim. And I did correct it in the second presentation, but I didn't highlight the fact. So someone pointed that out on one of the comments on YouTube. So I just want to identify that it is Jehoiakim where these 70 years begin. So that was just a minor point. I just want to recap over what we looked at with respect to the visions. We understand that the word vision in the book of Daniel are three separate words. There's the Hazon vision, the Mareh vision, and the Marah vision. And we didn't go through chapters 8, 9 and 10. We still haven't even got that far yet. We just had a quick review of Daniel chapter 8. And in Daniel chapter 8, what are the two visions that we're going to be dealing with of the three? The Hazon vision and the Mareh vision. Yeah? They're the two visions that we're addressing. And the reason why I want to just bring this up is because we had an email from one of our brothers, and I just wanted to read the email. We've read it out of class time, but I wanted to put it into the public record for other people who are watching so they can make some comment or see what the discussion is about. So in Daniel chapter 8, we see the word vision is brought up in verses 1, verses 2, verse 13, and then verse 15. So we've got verses 1, 2, 13, 15, 16, 17, 26, and 27. And on the surface it just says vision throughout the chapter, but we understand, of course, that there are different words for the word vision, and there's two words in the book of Daniel chapter 8, and the vision that's brought to view in verses 1 and 2 is the Hazon vision. And what we're saying the Hazon vision is just a simple definition of what that is. Yeah? So we're saying that the Hazon vision is prophetic history. verse 1 says, if we could go around the class, we're going to read Brother Henry. So verse 1, I'll quickly read the verses that are pertinent.
Okay, verse 1, it reads, In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first.
So we know that this is verse 1, it says the 3rd year of Belshazzar. We know the 3rd year of Belshazzar is his final year. We also know at this point that the Medes and Persians have already besieged the city of Babylon. They've taken most of the country, and the city is already under siege at this stage. It hasn't been taken, but the siege is already in place. Verse 2.
Okay. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai.
So we haven't gone into verse 2 in any detail, but we've begin to understand that when he's in the city of Shushan, it says he's in the palace. There isn't a palace in Shushan in the 3rd year of Belshazzar. So we're beginning to see that when he says that he was in this palace in Shushan, that he's actually transported in vision into a future history. And we can begin to put that puzzle together when we look at the historical background of when that palace was put in place, because we understand it's during the time period of Darius the Great. This is after Cyrus, a few years after Cyrus, and so we're making a play that this is when he's in the palace at Shushan. This is in the time period of Esther and into Artaxerxes.
Are we going to go into that?
We are going to go into that, yeah. So, verse 1 and 2, he's having this vision of prophetic history, and it's beginning the vision of chapter 8. Then verses 3 to 12 talk about the rise and fall of these empires. We've remembered it skips the nation of Babylon, and we've seen the reason it skips that is because verse 2 is telling us that he's in the palace at Shushan, and at the palace of Shushan, this is years after Babylon has come off the scene.
What palace is Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4?
Sorry, start in
What palace is Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4?
Daniel chapter 4.
Verse 4, 24, 4.
So let's turn to Daniel chapter 4. The question is, what palace is Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4? So, verse 4, and I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I understand that to be Babylon. Yeah. Because...
Later in this chapter we said, is this not?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was just looking for that verse. It says, is this not Babylon that I have built? I don't know if anybody can find that verse.
Is Shushan in Babylon?
No, Shushan is in the province of Elam. It says it in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1, I think, or verse 2.
Verse 30.
Let's just read verse 30. Chapter 4, verse 30. Could you read that for us, Brother Today?
The king spake and said, Is this not great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?
Okay, so going back to Daniel 8:2, Shushan is in the province of Elam, and if you can go onto Google Map there, and you can look at those cities, and they're separated by at least over 100 miles. They're totally different cities, different nations even.
But we're going to consider that more because I have some questions in regard to
Yes.
this.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is to do too many things at once, because I just get lost when I do that. So it runs through the chapter through the various kingdoms, and in verse 13 there's this dialogue between Christ and Gabriel. And so who's next to read verse 13?
Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot?
So here's this question and answer that we're all familiar with, but the more we look into it, the more we realise it's not that straightforward. Verse 14 gives us the answer. So it says, how long is the vision? And my contention is that this vision that's being spoken of is the vision of verses 1 and 2, the Hazon vision. How is this vision of prophetic history? How long is it going to be? And we know that there are some complications here, because it talks about two desolating powers. It talks about two things that are being desolated, and verse 14 only addresses the issue of the sanctuary being cleansed. Then verse 15.
And it came to pass, when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man.
So we've made comment on verse 15 that after seeing this vision, he begins to have questions that he wants to understand what is going on. And we've made some kind of intimation of why that is. And why was that? Brother Tabo, why is he asking this question about the length of this vision in relationship to where he's standing in the third year at the very end of Belshazzar?
I'm drawing a blanket.
Okay, someone else?
As far as I remember, it is because he couldn't understand the captivity of the 70 years in relationship to the 2,300 years.
Yes, so that's why he's got this question. Sorry.
A literal comparison to the spiritual.
Yes, so we're beginning to see that there's this narrative that's being brought right here, that there's this discussion between the literal and the symbolic, because we're around the 68th year, maybe the 67th year, depending on how we're going to look at where he is in the very last year of Belshazzar. He knows the prophecies of Jeremiah coming to its end, and it says in verse 9, after the Medes and Persians, after the Greeks, there's going to come another third power, this little horn power, that are going to continue to tread down the host. And he doesn't understand that, and hence his question, his consternation. And in the rest of the chapter, it sees that he doesn't really understand what's going on. Then verse 16.
And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. Marah.
So this vision that's been spoken of here is the Marah vision. It's a different vision. And you don't see it brought to view anywhere in the chapter before this, in the verses before. So what we've understood, based upon an understanding of Daniel 2, Daniel 7, where you see this Hazon vision. It's not called Hazon vision in chapter 2 and 7 directly, but you have this vision of prophetic history, and then you see how God is going to respond to this. In chapter 8, the response is the high priest going to the most holy place and cleansing the sanctuary on the Day of Atonement. And that's what, in verse 16, Christ is wanting Gabriel to make Daniel understand. And part of this astonishment is that he realises that this is not going to be occurring at the end of the 70 years where he would expect it to be. This is some kind of future symbolic application. But this is what Christ wants to understand. And so his issue is, as Brother Jonathan said, it's the relationship between the 70 years and the 2300 days. And we read that in Prophets and Kings. I can't remember the page number. Someone can...
It's in Review and Herald, March 21st.
It's in Review and Herald, and it's also, and I think it's also in Prophets and Kings as well. So what we're suggested is this. If we take Daniel chapter 8, we have 457, 1844. This is the Hazon vision. And right here, is the Moreh vision. Let's put that quickly.
Okay.
And this is the Hazon vision. And the reason why we're bringing this up again is because I want to read an email. Because there's some brethren who don't see it quite like this. They're seeing that the Hazon vision is the 2520, and that the Moreh vision is the 2300 days. And it's not that they're in total disagreement with what we're saying. Everybody still sees this, but they're saying that there's a relationship between what's going on here and what's going on here that gives them this ability to make, give them this understanding to make the 2300 days the Moreh vision. So I'll just read it out. As I said, we've read it out of class. I watched the first class and I want to share with you some thoughts on Daniel 8 with respect to the Hazon and the Moreh vision. Chapter 8 begins with the Hazon vision and explains the different powers until verse 12, where the activity of the papacy is introduced, which is 538 to 1798. So he's taken us from the beginning of the chapter, the Hazon vision is mentioned, and he goes to verse 12, and in verse 12 it talks about the final stage of Rome, the papal stage. I'm presuming we all understand the oscillation between masculine and feminine from verses 9 to 12. That's been in the public record for a long time, so we're not going to address that. But verse 12 is dealing with the papal phase of Rome. And papal phase of Rome, verse 12, it says that at the end of the verse, it says it cast down the truth to the ground and it practiced and prospered. This practicing and prospering is the time period from 538 to 1798. I think that's well understood. So he reads, he says, and explains the different powers until verse 12, where the activity of the papacy is introduced, which is 538 to 1798, practiced and prospered, until 1798, and he's also referencing Daniel 11 verse 36. Then in reference to the former verses, which lasted until 1798, the question is raised in verse 13, how long the Hazon of the treading down by these heathen powers, the daily as well as the papal power, which is the transgression of desolation. So just to break that down, verse 13 it says, how long shall be the vision, the Hazon vision, concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation. So there's the daily, which is the heathen powers, as he says, and the transgression of desolation, which is the papal power. And we all understand that. Yeah, there's two desolating powers. So the question is, how long should it last? The answer is given by Gabriel in verse 17 is in line with verses 1 to 12. So he's gone from the question in verse 13 down to verse 17. So I don't think we read verse 17. We should have read that before. So who's next to read verse 17?
8:17.
8:17.
So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be division.
So verse 17 is the Hazon vision it's speaking about, and it picks up this phrase, the time of the end, which is why the brothers bring in verse 17 into play here. So the question is, in verse 13, how long is the Hazon vision that's dealing with paganism and papalism to tread down God's kingdom, the host and the sanctuary? Then verse 17, it says, and this is, I believe Gabriel speaking. Is that right? Gabriel speaking here in verse 17. Yeah. So he came nearer where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the Hazon vision. And when it said, for at the time of the end, I understand that to mean that the Hazon vision will be fulfilled, it will be complete by the time of the end. That's how I read, for at the time of the end. It means it's going to be fulfilled. So that's why he's bringing verse 17 with verse 13. And then he's picking up the phrase, the time of the end, lining the time of the end that's brought to view here with Daniel 11 verse 40. Daniel 11 verse 40, the time of the end. And he's saying time of the end is 1798. So he's marking verse 17 as 1798. And that's how he begins to develop this logic that the Hazon vision is the 2520, which is the scattering. It's the two scatterings that go from 723, 538 to 1798. And that's basically the logic that he's using to bring this argument into play. So I'll read on. The answer is given by Gabriel in verse 17 is in line with verses 1 to 12, which is 1798. For at the time of the end, 1798, shall be the vision, Hazon, verse 17. In the Hazon of verse 13, two things get trodden down until 1798, which is 1, the host, and 2, the sanctuary. So what he's saying here, I understand that he's not saying this as a matter of fact. He's saying the way he reads verse 13, based upon how he's reading verse 17, he's making this conclusion, that the Hazon of verse 13, two things get trodden down until 1798, and then the treading down stops. So he's reading verse 13 in relationship to verse 17. And verse 17 is picking up the Hazon vision from 723 to 1798. It is therefore obvious that verse 13 talks about the first 2520, which ends in 1798. So the host as well as the sanctuary got trodden down until 1798, first by paganism, then by the papacy. And he says a bit more in a moment. The only reason we're reading this is because some of us do not see it that way, and we're just trying to resolve this issue. I've understood that verse 17, when it says the time of the end, is not 1798, but it's actually 1844. And my reasoning for that was in verse 19. In verse 19, it says, someone read verse 19?
And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed shall the end shall be.
So I've understood that the time of the end that's in verse 17 is this time appointed in verse 19, which is 1844, to bring it into agreement with verse 13 and verse 14. Because we understand verse 14 is 1844, but then you begin to get a disconnect if you make the Hazon vision only going up to 1798 and don't carry it on into 1844. So,
also you can say, well, I would personally say that the whole chapter is about the religion of these pagan powers. So if he was talking about Daniel 7, then yeah, I'd probably sway towards that kind of reasoning, because it's a civil, political element of it, which ended in 1798. But God's also bringing in his religion, God's bringing in his kingdom, which was brought in 1844. So for me personally, I think we've got to take that into consideration, that it's our sort of traditional, or it's our view that Daniel 8 is talking about the religions. So for me, it would be talking about God's religion when God cleanses his sanctuary and deals with his religious kingdom.
Is this wrong?
How I've seen it is that the trotting down and the cleansing are two different things. So the trotting down ends in 1798, but actually the cleansing is in 1844. So they both would end in 1798, but then there's that period of time until the sanctuary is made right. So I don't have any problem recognizing that the time of the end is in 1798 and verse 13, because both of those, the trottings down end, but yet in verse 14 then we have the cleansing, which is in 1844.
I agree with that. Verse 13, he says, how long is the Hazon vision going to be? And as soon as you start developing the logic that's being presented here, where you talk about this trailing down, the answer in verse 14 isn't the answer to the question. Because if we're going to say how long is the Hazon vision, first of all, we're saying the Hazon vision is 22,500 years. And then we're saying the Hazon vision ends in 1798. But then in verse 14, we're saying the answer isn't even the answer to the question. So
but there is two different things: a trotting down and a cleansing. There.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise we had someone there. Okay, Sister, we'll just finish this conversation, Sister Tanya, and then I'll let you speak. Yes, we have to get this connection between the two.
Because they're separate and they're different. Correct?
Yes. Verse 13 and verse 14, to me, has to be connected with verses 1 and 2. Because when he says in verse 13, how long is the Hazon vision, the first place that I'd go back to is verses 1 and 2. And we know, we have good evidence to say that's not 723, that's 457. So when he says how long is this vision that we're talking about, it seems to me he's talking about this vision here, the 2300 days. And Ellen White says that his issue is the relationship between the 70 and the 2300 days. But we're not trying to say that the 2520 is not connected to the 2300 days. Verse 19 talks about that when we see the last end of the indignation. It's just that I struggle to see when we take verse 17 and verse 13 to exclude 1844, because that's what seems to be happening. And then if you exclude it, what you end up doing is you're saying you're going to make the Murray vision the 2300 days.
I don't know about that. I don't think you exclude it though when you include in verse 14 with it. To me that ties in all of them, 1798 and 1844, in my mind. Why am I not connecting that correctly?
So do you see that the Hazon vision includes both of these? Is that what you're saying?
I do.
Yes, and I agree with that. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying, yes.
Okay.
So out of class when we spoke about this, even in class when we first put it up, we're saying that the Hazon vision is both the 2300 days and 2520, but the focus in chapter 8 is only dealing with the 2300 days portion of the 2520. And at first sight, I never understood why. I assumed that it was because Babylon is coming out of the scene and he's just focusing on the last three kingdoms. But we understand now there's a prophetic significance of what's being brought to view by the Palace of Shushan. So, yes, I think you and I at least are in agreement that the Hazon vision is both of them, and the Murray vision is what Christ does at the end of this period of time. That's how I've understood it. But it is distinctly different to say that the Hazon vision is only the 2520 and the Murray vision is only the 2300 days, and that's what the difference is. So yeah, I agree. In verse 13, verse 17 and verse 19, the way those questions and answers are brought together, you can't help but see that the 2300 days and the 2520 are both prophetic history of the trampling down or the re-establishment of God's people, but they're dealing with different aspects of that.
Yes.
Were you going to say something? Cause,
No, it's okay.
Sister Tanya, in one moment, Brother Michael was just going to say something.
No, I said
Oh.
yes. I say amen. I agree
Okay.
with what you're saying. The question has to be answered in verse 14.
Yeah? Sister Tanya.
Okay, I'd like to point out that according to William Miller's rules, in order for us to come to an understanding at one point, we have to bring all the verses that we find in the Bible on that particular subject. And then we have to determine exactly what that subject is trying to deal with. What I'm trying to say is that if you were to take all the verses from the Bible that are dealing with the Hazon vision, and then you put them all together in Hebrew and in Aramaic, in Aramaic, the Hazon vision is basically the Chavez. And you have to put them all together in order for you to really understand what you're dealing with. Instead of just going into Daniel, and especially just Daniel 8, and then trying to understand what exactly the Hazon vision is. even in the back of Habakkuk says when you write the vision is the Hazon vision. And we know that the 1843 and the 1850 charge has the Hazon vision upon them both. And so this is what I'm having a struggle too with what you're saying that the 2300 days is actually the Hazon vision. Now I'm going to try to break it down because the Mare vision that is dealing with is basically dealing with the 70 weeks and with the 2300 days. And I believe Daniel 8:16 is the one that's making the connection because it's the Boger and it's the day and evening and it's calling it the Mare, the Mare.
Sorry, which verse?
And if
You said verse 16. You, we didn't read verse 16.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm wrong. It's not the 8:16, but there's one that says that it's talking about in the Boger and
Is that-
and the evening.
Is that 26? We think it's verse 26 you're referring to.
Yes, the 26. And the vision is the Mare vision of the evening and the morning.
Can we read it?
So it's true.
We'll read verse 26 out because I don't know how much people can pick up on the microphone.
But
So
I haven't finished my thought.
I know, we just read verse 26 for everybody and then carry on with your thought. We're just reading the verse out. So can someone read verse 26?
And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true, whereof shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days.
Okay. You can carry.
So the vision of the evening is actually the Mare vision of the evening, and then the shut up the vision is actually the Hazon vision of many days. There's a distinction between those two.
Yes, we agreed that there's a distinction between the two.
Yeah. The Mare vision is actually dealing with Christ beginning his action in the sanctuary. For him, the 70 weeks basically describe Jesus coming on earth, dealing his work as a lamb, doing the sacrifice, and then it ends with him beginning as a priest in the holy place. The 2300 days pointing out to when he's going to exit out of the holy place and enter into the most holy place, finishing the work of his people. There's a distinction between Mare and between Hazon.
Everybody, I don't know if the mic's picking up everything that you're saying. Everybody agrees that there's a distinction between the two. I'm going to finish reading this email off because I think he's going to say he's going to be in agreement with what you're saying. I think I'm just going to summarise. 457 is when the sanctuary begins to get restored, and by 1844 it is restored. So this is where I think Sister Tanya is talking about that the Mare vision is this 2300 days because it's Christ restoring the sanctuary, and it takes this time period for him to do that. So I'm going to read the rest of the email because that's what this brother is saying as well. 1798 was typified by 536, and we're still addressing that issue in our discussions, which was the time of the end. So which was the end of the 70 years of captivity. So we've got a picture of that, yeah? 536 is the end of the 70 years, which is the first year of Cyrus, and Ellen White says that's the end of the 70 years, which would be typifying 1798, the end of the captivity. So we're not making any point about 538 or 536 in this context. The beginning of the first decree to rebuild the temple sanctuary, which is a type of the first angel in 1798, marking the beginning of the rebuilding of the spiritual temple sanctuary. In order to fulfill verse 14, which points to October 22nd, 1844, the sanctuary needs to be rebuilt first. That is exactly what happened from 1798 to 1844, as typified by 536 to 457. So, (536) time of the end to 457. He's lining that up. We've done this in a number of different ways. Is 1798 and 1844. So he says, this is the decree to begin to rebuild the temple by Cyrus, and 1798 the temple begins to be rebuilt. So he says that this time period is the same as this time period, hence 457 and 1844 are the same, and if this is the restoration or the cleansing of the sanctuary, then the beginning typifies the end. And this is the 2300 days. And because this is the Marea vision, then this is typifying the Marea vision, and then the whole time period would also be typifying the Marea vision. That's the argument that he's bringing forward. I'm just going to read his email because I'm just summarising before what he's going to say, because when you read it, I find it hard to process that. But if you when I read it, see if that's what you're understanding he's saying, because I think that's what he's going to say. I'm going to quickly just backtrack a second. 1798 was typified by 536, which was the end of the 70 years. 536 marks the beginning of the first decree. What I didn't do here, which I should have just done, is that this is the 70-year captivity, and this is the 1260. So this is the same as this. So you can see these parallels all working through, and so you can see his reasoning behind doing this. 536 marks the beginning of the first decree to rebuild the temple sanctuary, which is a type of the first angel in 1798, marking the beginning of the rebuilding of the spiritual temple sanctuary. In order to fulfill verse 14, which points to 1844, the sanctuary needs to be rebuilt first. That is exactly what happened from 1798 to 1844, as typified by 536 to 457. So I've read all that previously, now I'm reading a new portion. The 10th day of the 7th month, 457 BC, Day of Atonement, is the beginning of the 2300 days, which typifies October 22nd, 1844, which is the end of the 2300 days. Perfect Day of Atonement, or the antitype. Thus the 2300 is the Marea, though it highlights the end thereof. It is illustrated already from its beginning. The beginning and the end show the same truth, that is, the restoring of the sanctuary on the Day of Atonement. Therefore, the Marea is a point in time, but also a period of time. This would be in line with our present understanding that the Marea is illustrated from 9/11 onward, which is a period of time, but also a definite point in time marked at midnight. Just to make a clarification, I suggest that there is a difference between the end of the treading down of the host and the sanctuary and the restoring thereof. Daniel chapter 7 verses 19 to 25 and Revelation 11:2. That is, I suggest that the restoring is not immediately after the end of the treading down, but is a three-step process as illustrated from 536 to 457 and 1798 to 1844. So all he's bringing to view here is the first, second and third decrees, and the first, second and third angel's message. This three-step process. This is Cyrus, Darius and Artaxerxes. This is all familiar stuff. This would after the end of the treading down, but there is a three-step process illustrated from 536 to 457 in 1798 to 1844. On October 22nd, 1844, the host and the sanctuary were thus restored, which is verses 14 and 19. I hope you could follow my reasoning. If not, please feel free to ask. That's it. So, is this what you're? This is what you're saying, Sister Tanya? As far as I understand.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what Brother Gilbert is saying in his article too.
Okay, so
If you look at the fact of the matter of the history, after 1844,
So let me just put this. He's not a pioneer, but he's a contemporary of Ellen White. His name is F.C. Gilbert. He was a converted Jew. He wrote an article on Daniel chapter 8, and you can get it online perhaps, but we should upload it and put it as a link to these presentations. So I'll do that. I'll put the link up, or I'll give it to Brother Tyler to do that. But there's a discussion in F.C. Gilbert's about this issue, and which Sister Tanya wants to bring into this. Brother Michael.
There's many things that I disagree with about this, but one of the things, I mean, if we're going to hone in, because you're emphasizing it right here, that the beginning...
Let's go through the things that you disagree with.
Okay.
I'm
going to start with
this. Okay, yeah.
The thing that I disagree with is that, or at this level, is the logic that if the beginning of a prophecy is the same as the end of a prophecy, therefore the whole prophecy is what the beginning and the end is. That's what he's essentially saying. He's saying if the beginning's the Day of Atonement and the end's the Day of Atonement, then the whole thing's the Day of Atonement.
So just that issue, everybody, we're all in agreement that the beginning typifies the end. Everybody understands that logic, but what we're not in agreement is that because the beginning and the end are typified one by another, that it means that this duration then becomes a symbol of the beginning and the end, because the beginning is the Moreh, and what you're suggesting is that because the 2300 days links this, then this becomes a symbol of the Moreh vision as opposed to remaining the Hazon vision. So that's the first thing, that beginning and the end, we all agree with that principle, but it doesn't mean the duration is the same thing.
Yes.
So before your next point,
so where's at least one in the Bible, an alternate prophecy that disproves this idea then? Where's another example that will disprove this idea? Does that make, I don't know how to ask that question.
Okay, so the question that's been asked is, I'll ask it in the reverse way.
Okay.
If we're saying that the beginning typifies the end, therefore the duration then becomes a symbol of this whole beginning and end, where else do we see that occurring in
Amen.
Where else don't we see?
Yeah.
You should say don't, but I'm saying the easiest way is because we're saying this is a fact. Where else would we see that? We'd have to find another place to see that we would do that.
Yeah.
So that's that question.
We do see it in the Bible, and maybe we're all not agreeing on this, and maybe this is a thought like that, but we see it when we see midnight to the midnight cry, in the sense that, and this is sort of what he's saying, is that if midnight is bitter and the midnight cry is bitter, the whole thing's bitter. Or if the earthquake is at midnight and then the symbols can switch back and forth, it's describing the duration of the prophecy. I don't know if I necessarily agree with what he's saying, but that is at least the principle we've been using in terms of midnight to the midnight cry. I don't know if it applies on this larger scale though.
I was going to ask that, is the midnight to midnight cry a unique?
That's what I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we've also been bringing time dilation into a lot of other things recently this week, other than just midnight to the midnight. Where does that? Yeah.
How far can you go with this?
Yeah, and this has been a problem we've had with midnight, with the binding off. We had to wrestle with this idea. How far can you go? Because the way we originally saw it, you could infinitely go into the binding off, and there'd be a binding off of the binding off.
De facto, it's the same concept. We got to.
So I don't know where the break is, but I do know we at least do use that logic for the binding off. But again, I don't know if it applies here.
Okay. So we don't know of another kind of conventional time prophecy that has this similarity. So that was the first thing you disagreed with.
And the second thing that I disagree with, you've already highlighted, but it's that there's a question in verse 13, and the answer to the question, even if it's only part of the answer, is given in verse 14. And what I understand is being said right here is that the answer is actually given in verse 17. So what's verse 14? It doesn't like I don't understand.
Can you rephrase that?
I don't understand. If you say, how long is the Hazon vision, and then the very next verse gives you the answer, but you're saying, no, that's not the answer. The answer's actually 3 verses later in verse 17.
So I know Sister Tanya and others, probably this brother, has a more sophisticated answer to that. But I see that in that same simple way, that verse 13 is a question, and then verse 17, because we're using this phrase time of the end in verse 17 as a unique phrase to identify 1798, we're going back into verse 13 and defining that by how we define in verse 17 the time of the end.
Yeah.
And then verse 14 becomes disconnected, at least on the surface level. And I know we're not suggesting that anybody's trying to disconnect verse 14 from all of this thing, but there is on the surface a disconnect between two, because verse 17 is now controlling what verse 13 is talking about, and that's not the way I've ever read this before. I don't think even Ellen White.
No, she doesn't.
I don't think she even talks about verse 17 in any connection with 13.
I think she just says the answer is verse 14. And then the last point, the last point that I see that you touched on, I don't think you agree with me either.
One moment, we're just going to just give him his last point, and then you can.
Everybody should go type in time of the end in the spirit of prophecy. I know it's true that we apply it at a point, 1798 and 1989, so I'm not denying that. But I think that we need to understand that all of the pioneers and Sister White, every time they relate to the time of the end, it's not a point in time, it's always a period, every single time. And I can say that assuredly because I've read everything that she says with time of the end. There's not that many hits. And when you go through what she's saying, she always relates to it as the end of the world, the time of the end of the world, a period beginning in 1798, stretching until Christ returns, every single time. So for us to understand it as a point is true, but we also need to bring in that other definition. Symbols can have more than one meaning. So to relate to it strictly as only 1798 is incorrect. Now you've approached it a different way. You said you don't have to strictly relate to it as 1798. You can relate to it also as 1844, which I know I have to wrestle with these two things. But my point is that the Spirit of Prophecy defines it as a period of time from 1798 forward. Every time she speaks about it.
Does anybody else have any comments or thoughts before I let Sister Tanya make her response? No?
Just one comment.
Yeah.
That verse 15, it gives it an inference of a passing of time. He asks the question in 13, he gets an immediate answer, and then it seems like when you read it through context that some time goes by. Just if you were writing it on a timeline for me, he asks the question, he gets an answer, and then a new thought kind of begins.
New scene takes place.
Yeah, new scene, yeah, a scene change. And that to me allows you to have, back to his second point, allows you to have that, I don't know, a scene change, that's all I see.
I've noticed that there's a scene change between 13, because 14 I've understood to be Christ in the most holy place, and then verse 15, it seems to shift scenes, and then this is done. Sister Tanya, you were going to respond to Brother Michael.
I was going to point out, Michael, that basically she said that part of the answer was given in verse 14, but not the whole answer, and that makes a big difference.
I agree with that.
Exactly what Sister Bronwyn is saying. There's a change in and it basically gives you a part of the puzzle to figure out something about the sanctuary, because the 2300 days are connected with the cleansing of the sanctuary. And we know that with the sanctuary, it's all about Jesus Christ and the work that he has to do to restore the host, or to restore, the men back into the unfallen state of Adam.
Can I ask you a question, Sister Tanya? In
Sure.
the 70-year captivity, do you see that as the Hazon vision or the Mareh vision?
That's part of the Hazon vision.
Okay, so
Because if you look carefully,
yes, I think.
if you look carefully at Daniel's prayer,
So I agree that it's the Hazon vision.
basically requested two things.
Is there a?
Yeah, there's a little bit.
So I agree that it's the Hazon vision, then when Ellen White, maybe we should read that statement where she says the relationship between the two. I don't know if anybody can find it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
We're just going to read the statement where she says that he doesn't understand the relationship between the two. Okay, it's in Prophets and Kings 554.1. Prophets and Kings 554.1. Through another vision, which is Daniel chapter 8, further light was thrown upon the events of the future, and it was at the close of this vision, that Daniel heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision? So I'm understanding that she says, at the close of this vision, the Hazon vision, which is verse 12, Daniel heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision? Daniel 8:13. The answer that was given unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, filled him with perplexity. Earnestly he sought for the meaning of the vision. And that's the Hazon vision, we know that. He could not understand the relation sustained by the 70 years captivity as foretold through Jeremiah to the 2,300 years. That in vision he heard the heavenly visitant declare should elapse before the cleansing of God's sanctuary. So, I'll read the best of it. The angel Gabriel gave him a partial interpretation, yet when the prophet heard the words, the vision shall be for many days, he fainted away. I, Daniel, fainted, and he records of his experience, and was sick certain days. Afterwards I rose and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. The way I've read this, he could not understand the relation sustained by the 70 years, which is the Hazon captivity, as foretold through Jeremiah, to the 2,300 years. That in vision he heard the heavenly visitant declare should elapse before the cleansing of God's sanctuary. So I've read that statement to mean that 70 years was the Hazon vision, and now this Hazon vision is going to carry on for another, or until the end of the 2,300 days before we're going to come to the Mareh vision. But I know you see that differently.
No, I believe that the 70 years are part of the household vision, but I really, again, I'm going to accentuate that we need to go back and figure out and give a definition from all the verses from the Bible, what the household vision is, where it begins and where it ends.
Could we give you what we've defined it as prophetic history? It's any reform line, any story from the scriptures that we're going to take and bring to the end of the world, that is the Hazon vision. It can be a small portion of history, or it can be a very long prophecy. It's every time you see... Carry on.
The book of Habakkuk tells us that the vision that was to Jerry, it was basically the 1843 chart and the 1850 chart. And when you look on those two charts, the very beginning date for both of those charts, you have 677 BC. Correct?
We agree with that? Does everybody understand that? One moment, Sister Tanya.
So I was just going to say, like, we already mentioned that the vision can start in the Garden of Eden. And if you look on the second chart, you can see that they've added to it. They have the sanctuary in there, and then they have it continuing down for the future, for the third woe and stuff that hadn't happened. So if we're going to say it's just the 2520, then the Hazon just ends in 1844, right? Like the 2520 ends in 1844. Then the second chart doesn't actually have the Hazon vision on it.
So I'm saying you have to include.
It's everything.
You said it's everything.
Let's obligation and you have the spiritual obligation.
Let's just read Habakkuk chapter 2. Because you pointed us to Habakkuk chapter 2. Did someone have a comment? Someone said something? As we turn there. I'm not sure who's next.
I think so.
We'll pick up from we'll read verses 1 to 3.
I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved.
And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it.
For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak, and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry.
So in verse 2 and verse 3, it uses the word vision. It says, write the vision, make it plain upon tables. And then in verse 2, I think what you've said, Sister Tanya, it says, write the vision and make it plain upon tables. So upon these tables, the vision was made plain, and you're picking up the fact that the vision that's being addressed here is 677 to 1844. And then you're going to see the same here, you're going to see 677 to 1844. So that's verse 2, I think you're saying that the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. And I don't think we're in a disagreement with that, but verse 3 then goes on to say, for the vision is yet for an appointed time. So this is the Hazon vision, and this appointed time that's been brought to view here is in relationship to the Hazon vision, but at the end it shall speak and it shall not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. So we know verse 3 is talking about 1844, not 1798, and it says the Hazon vision is yet for the appointed time of 1844. And we know that the way both of these charts were constructed in 1850, that it's actually the 457 to 1844 that's highlighted or in larger font. So this is, and this does the same, 457 to 1844. Hence we're saying, I think Sister Bronya mentioned it, that the 2300 days and the 2520 are both at one level the same vision, that they're both the Hazona. I would have thought Habakkuk chapter 2 is agreeing with what we're saying. Brother Michael.
I agree with you, and I just want to re-emphasize this point. You read that statement from Prophets and Kings. It says, how long shall be the vision? And then she says, the answer that was given is verse 14. She says, the answer that was given is unto 2300 days. So I think it's really important that we see that we understand that connection, that the answer to the question in 13 is 2300 days.
Yeah.
At least part of the answer. I get that there's a sanctuary in the host. I understand.
Yes, we're in agreement, it's the partial.
Yeah.
But we would also, if the question is being asked in 13, we would go through the Bible and find where that exact question is being asked at different points. How long? Who's asking it?
Yep.
The end point, that same question, and we compare all those how longs and get a more complete answer to that question. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And where does it go?
And so
it goes to the Sunday law.
Goes to the Sunday law.
Yeah.
So
when you go through and run
in
it.
previous studies, you're saying that just the phrase, how long?
Actually, I disagree with you. It doesn't just go to Sunday law. It goes all the way to the restoring till basically...
That's the answer to the question in the Bible.
Oh, sorry, Sister Tanya? You disagreed with what?
I said that the 2300 days, the restoring of the sanctuary or the restoring of the host is dealing, because if you look at the Day of Atonement in Leviticus 16, it's telling you exactly what needs to happen in order to accomplish the Day of Atonement.
Yeah.
The Day of Atonement is not done until basically the goat is taken away.
All of us, I think all of us here are in agreement with that statement, but the only point that Sister Bronwyn was suggesting was that you can take this phrase "how long" and turn it into a symbol, and that symbol, when you run it through a study, leads to the Sunday law. And the only point that she was bringing that up for was because it's saying in verse 13 how long is going to take you to 1844. Because 1844 is typifying the Sunday law. She's just saying the connection between verse 13 and verse 14 is not just a Spirit of Prophecy quote or a structure, it's even in the symbol of what how long refers to.
Amen.
Is that what you're saying?
Amen.
Sorry.
1844 also typifies the closed door, the closed formation.
Yes.
Okay.
The Sunday law time period. Sunday law through the Sunday law. It's not. We're not just saying at the Sunday law at one point in time. It's
The Sunday law crisis.
takes you to the Sunday law crisis. I mean, that's how I understand the answer
Yeah.
to the question, which ends at the close of probation.
So we're not trying to narrow everything down. We're just saying that there's this symbol that leads you to 1844 in verse 13. Habakkuk chapter 2, I think, if we're going to pick up that phrase, Hazon, takes you to 1844. And the question and answer itself is taking you to 1844. How I've understood it is that Daniel's focus is on the Hazon. He's interested in prophetic history, and Christ is saying, prophetic history is good, but you need to understand my role in all of this.
Amen.
Amen.
That's how I see the difference between the two.
Yeah.
And I understand that you're seeing the work of Christ here and the work of Christ here. And we're not, I don't think any of us are disagreeing that even the Hazon vision, even the 2520 is the work of Christ. Mm-hmm. There's no disagreement of that. But it's the work of Christ in prophetic history, not how, the way I phrase it, is not how he sorts out the problem. The Murray vision is how he sorts out prophetic history, what he does, how he responds to it, at a conclusion, at the end of it, if you like. But the events that are transpiring through this history are all the work of Christ. Which is why we spend so much time in reform lines. Sorry, people looking at I should be looking over here. Which is why we spend so much time. Sorry.
So there's a work of Christ, but there's also work that his people has to do. The host has to do his people. You cannot separate the two of them. That's what I'm trying to say. The work of Christ in the sanctuary cannot be done without his people doing their part of the work. You can't separate the two of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a distinction.
I think we will agree with that. I don't know if there's any more that we're going to say on this at the moment. I just wanted just to update and refresh our minds about this issue with the Hazon and the Murray vision.
So to recap what we're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, or not what we're saying, but what is being talked about, the discussion is whether or not the 2300 is emphasizing at least in terms of the Mara vision, the end of 1844, that one specific moment, or the entire period of the 2300.
Yeah.
Okay.
I say testimony of two. I need to see it somewhere else.
So
at least.
What the question is we're saying is that if we're saying that the beginning and the end and the duration all take the same symbol, we'd have to see that. We'd have to see another testimony of that. And the suggestion is that the binding off does that for us, but the binding off might be something that's
other than the binding off.
Other than the binding off, maybe something that's uniquely different. Yes.
Can I add a little more?
Please.
In my study that I've done with the first, second, and third angel's message in the light of these three visions, I wasn't there. I didn't really quite hear the definition that you guys gave to the Hazon vision. But if you take it back all the way to the original purpose, it's something to gaze at, something to mentally perceive. And under the first angel's message, the Lord wants to give us a new mind, a new way of thinking, reaching from contrary faith the way he would think. And the second angel's message, the Lord wants to give us a new heart. And the Mare vision is basically something that it just appears in
Go through. Go through the number 1 again.
The Hazon vision, the way the definition of that vision, I see it as something to be perceived mentally.
Yeah. So let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there. I think that's what we're all saying here. We're saying that the Hazon vision is something that you're to perceive, to understand in your mind. But we're saying the same thing, but we're using the definition that it's prophetic history. What you need to see is throughout the Bible, prophetic history, and you need to perceive that in your mind. So that definition that you're using, I think we're in agreement with that. That's how we're defining it as well. The work of Christ here on earth, but we're calling it prophetic history as God's people run through that history and as the nations of the earth do as well.
Okay, so in the light of the reform, revive, and then the judgment, I'm kind of, because when I look up the word reform, throughout Sister White's basically saying the Lord wants us to give a new mind, a new way of thinking. Revive is basically giving a new life, or basically Christ and giving a new life, the appearance of Christ.
So this new way of thinking, you're saying that the Hazonis gives you a new way of thinking, and that's what we teach. That's what we're saying. The reform lines give you a new way of thinking. They have ability, they have power within them to change you.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that if the Hazon vision represents the first angel's message and the Maharay represents the second one, the two of them basically revives you and gets you ready for the judgment, or you can actually go to the Maharay vision.
That's how I've understood it. Is that how... Do you want to repeat that? Oh, so she says that the Hazon vision has the power, has the ability to change how you think. And that's what our contention is about the reform lines. Most people that I've met who oppose this message see the reform lines as a means to an end. They see the end is Christ, and this is a means to get to him. But we understand it differently. We understand that the reform lines, the Hazon vision, is the work of Christ himself. It's not some kind of means to an end. And because of that, a study of the reform lines has power within it to change the way you think and the way you feel. When you eat this book, you and Christ become one. So we're in agreement with that. So when we say that the 2300 days is the Hazon vision and not the Mareh vision, it might appear that we're trying to say the 2300 days is just some kind of facts and figures, and that's not the point. Then the second one, the Mareh vision, is when you have a confrontation with Christ, you see him, and then the Marah vision is
The appearance of Christ.
Yes.
Because the Mareh vision is dealing with the appearance of Christ, always appearing in front of you. It's visual. This is the Mareh. This is what I'm saying. This is basically when you get revived. This is the 2300 days vision that I see it as.
okay.
That point's more that
This is a little different. That's what I'm saying.
that definition.
Yeah, at one level we should not be separating them. Brother Tyler.
That definition of which is 100% accurate, the appearance of Christ points to a point, furthermore to a point, because it's when Christ appears in front of you. It's not the whole time he's been in front of you. It's a specific moment isolated from a larger picture, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop this part of the study now because I think we're just going over the same bit of information. Let me rub some of this out. We've been looking at some chronology, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on that. There's this issue about 609, 608. We haven't really addressed 609, and we've mentioned 606. These are the two dates that we've spoken of. At some length. And in relation to this, so we need to address where the kings lie on this, but at the moment we're seeing that this is Jehoiakim. And I asked Brother Ariel to bring to us, sorry, Carchemish. I think that's spelled Carchemish.
Something like that.
And he's just gonna. We've got 15 minutes left, so however much long he takes, 5 or 10 minutes, or even depending on how long what he's got to share with us. We just want to look at Carchemish, and we want to look at the history of this, and maybe how it relates to prophecy. So we're looking at Carchemish, and we're going to bring this in to see what impact Carchemish has on our understanding of the history that we're dealing with at that level, and also at the end of the world.
Speak loudly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can give a very clear overview, but I'll do my best. Carchemish 606, 608, 609.
Beneath the
It's
Bible.
underneath the Bible.
Oh, thanks. Brother Parminder just noticed that 606, we can align this with Jehoiakim. And in a study before, I think it was yesterday evening and maybe even last week, we read a quote from Sister White where she noticed that the end of the 70 weeks, the 70 years, that it is at the point where, let me think, where Cyrus assigns, how do you say that? Ascends on the throne. And we know that 2 years after
Fall of Babylon.
The fall of Babylon, and the fall of Babylon was on 538. So Cyrus ascends to the throne at 536. And if this is 70 years, if this is the 70-year period, or she says that the 70-year period ends here, when Cyrus ascends to the throne. So it must begin in 606. That's the logic. That's one. Let me think. We know that in the time of Jehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar came to conquer Jerusalem and take them captive, and for example Daniel was taken captive. If you see in Daniel 1:1, you see that it is noticed that in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. But we have a little problem in the sense that the Bible mentions here the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, but in other places it mentions the 4th year. And that's, for example, Jeremiah
25.
25, right? Yeah. Jeremiah 25, verse 1, where it reads, "The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, that was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon." So you see here that the 4th year of... So Daniel says this is the third year of Jehoiakim, where King Nebuchadnezzar comes to Jerusalem. But here it says, in the fourth year of Jehoiakim is the first year of Nebuchadnezzar. But that's not. It seems to contradict each other. I searched for Uriah Smith has something on this in his book, and he says this overthrow of Jerusalem was predicted by Jeremiah and immediately accomplished 606 and in Jeremiah 25:8-11. Jeremiah placed this captivity in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, Daniel in the third. This seeming discrepancy is explained by the fact that Nebuchadnezzar set out on his expedition near the close of the third year of Jehoiakim, from which point Daniel reckons. But he did not accomplish the subjugation of Jerusalem till about the 9th month of the fourth year, of the following year. And from this year, Jeremiah reckons. So, Uriah Smith claims...
Where is this? What page?
Uriah Smith, Daniel and Revelation 24, page 24, paragraph 1.
However, Sister White says that Daniel was taken captive in the third year of Jehoiakim. So I don't know if Uriah Smith is correct about his understanding.
Me neither, but it's just, yeah, true. It still looks contradicting if you just read what the Bible says, and here it says that there is a starting. Where do you start from reckoning? And they reckon from the start of the siege of Nebuchadnezzar. That's Daniel, and Jeremiah starts counting at the end of it. Another thing is just to illustrate where we are, because if you go to Jeremiah 46, verse 2, because I was asked to say something about Carchemish, and I did not say anything about it yet. Jeremiah 46, verse 2 says, against the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was by the river Euphrates in Carchemish, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, smote in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. So you have to know, I also had to look this up on the internet, but if this is Israel, then here is Egypt, and you got, well, I'll keep this here. You got Jerusalem, Samaria, Damascus, and I think somewhere here is Carchemish. It's at the border of Syria. It's now in the area of Turkey. So you must know that if Daniel says that he was taken captive in the third year of Jehoiakim, and we read here that in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, in Jeremiah 46:2, it says that Nebuchadnezzar came to conquer king of Egypt in Carchemish. But the question is, how was it able? Pharaoh Necho was reigning here. He was the big boss there. He had his army here. How was it possible for Nebuchadnezzar to come here in the third year to take Daniel captive? He must have conquered Pharaoh first.
Several hundred miles.
You must, if you come here from, this is the king of the north. You must first conquer Pharaoh before you can take captive people from Jerusalem and return.
Why must you?
Sorry?
Why must you? There's no other way, because I can't see it geography in my mind. There's no other way to get around
That's
it.
the what. Yeah, maybe.
You could have cut across the Sinai. No, it's not Sinai. Sorry, the Arabian
That's what I want.
Peninsula. They could have cut across down low and come up and conquered
Probably, yeah.
from east,
This
west.
is what I had
and
to think
north.
about. That it's
So why must you?
This way.
Why must he have done that? I don't understand. He had. You're saying he had to go through Carchemish. That was the only way to get
no,
down.
not so much through Carchemish, but at least through this area.
He had to.
So maybe they went up.
Yeah.
Somehow they bypassed
Carchemish.
Yeah.
Here's
So-
Babylon,
Sorry, can you
Jerusalem. And if the king of Egypt is up here, how can
we just have one?
Nebuchadnezzar go down here?
Brother Jonathan, if you want to make a comment,
Okay.
so that the microphone can pick it up, so that.
Yeah, I just showed her a map where Carchemish is because
Okay, yeah, that's but just so everybody can.
yeah, it's like just a map so she could have it in her eye
Yeah.
how the map looks like.
Alright. So that's just what I got historically on Carchemish. Carchemish is a city in Syria where there were two battles in biblical history at least. You have the battle where we know where Josiah died. I'm changing a little bit from topic now because try to go to a little prophetic application on Carchemish. Josiah's death is, for example, in 2 Chronicles 35 verse 20 and 2 Kings 23-29, where you have the first battle in Carchemish, where the king of the south, Egypt, comes up and battles against the king of the north, Babylon. And here in the time of Josiah, Egypt wins this battle. But a couple of years later, in the time of Jehoiakim, and that was where we're talking about, this battle, there's another battle in Carchemish again, where the king of the north, and that's described in Jeremiah 46:2, where it says that where Nebuchadnezzar against Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, smote in the 4th year Pharaoh Necho. So he conquers, or he wins this battle. So you have the king of the north and the king of the south here. Who and if we apply this, I don't know if I'm able to do that. I'm sorry?
The Babylonian capital was Carchemish after 609 BC.
The Babylonian.
And so they wouldn't have fought themselves. They would have gone down, conquered Jerusalem, come back, and then fought the battle over their oppressors to gain control. And therefore they don't have to pass from Carchemish or through Carchemish. They were having a struggle with the Scythians and the Medes, and they moved from Babylon to Haran, and then from Haran to Carchemish. And then they went from Carchemish, conquered Jerusalem, came back up, and wiped out the oppressors. It's kind of what it sounds like.
But at the time of Josiah.
Yeah, in
it
666.
it was Egypt who won the battle.
The Battle of Carchemish. Who are they fighting in Carchemish? Is Babylon fighting Egypt, or is Babylon conquering or taking over Carchemish?
I don't know if they're taking over Carchemish, but you at least have mentioned Carchemish in the time of.
Well, I was understanding.
We've only got a few minutes.
Oh,
you
yeah,
try
yeah.
and finish off what you wanted to say,
Alright.
because otherwise we won't get the point.
This was my historical part, so I don't have I don't have extra information now on the
That's fine.
on the historical side. The only thing is we can apply this on our time, or at least prophetically, if you look to the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, we know that in Daniel 11 verse 40 is described, or Daniel 11 is described the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. One battle between the king of the north and between the king of the south, we see prophetically was in Revelation, although it's not mentioned there, Revelation 9:1, where the king of Persia and the king of Persia and the king of Rome were battling with the king of Rome. It's the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the Syrian Empire battle. And you see here the rise of Islam. This is not the right. I don't think I can finish this in the seconds there are left. Maybe it's good to finish it here.
Okay.
Yeah, I will finish it. Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for the opportunity to come together and study together. Father, we're going deep into the words and into details. And we want to ask you for a blessing upon the study, that we may be able to understand. It's difficult sometimes to understand, and therefore we pray for patience, for understanding, for your Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Be with us this day as we go forward in our duties and our work for this day. Give us strength and health, and give us a good and blessed day. We ask and pray this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Mm-hmm.